Maria Santos had been cleaning office buildings in downtown Chicago for over 30 years. At 78 years old, her weathered hands still moved with the same careful precision they had when she first started the job. Every morning at 4:30, she would wake up in her small apartment, make herself a cup of strong coffee, and prepare for another day of keeping the city's business district spotless. The Meridian Tower was her favorite building to clean, 24 floors of gleaming glass and steel that housed dozens of small businesses, law firms, and accounting offices. Maria knew every corner of that building, every stain that needed special attention, every window that caught the morning light just right. The security guards knew her by name, and many of the office workers would leave her small notes of appreciation along with their empty coffee cups. What Maria didn't know was that the building had recently attracted some very dangerous new tenants. On the 15th floor, behind the frosted glass doors marked Sunrise Consulting, a group of men had set up what appeared to be a legitimate business operation. They wore expensive suits, carried leather briefcases, and maintained professional appearances during business hours. But Sunrise Consulting was nothing more than a front for one of Chicago's most ruthless criminal organizations. Vinny Torino ran the operation with an iron fist. At 45 years old, he had spent more than half his life involved in illegal activities, ranging from loan sharking to money laundering. The Meridian Tower location was perfect for his needs. Respectable address, multiple exit routes, and plenty of legitimate businesses to help his operation blend in. The last thing he wanted was any unwanted attention from law enforcement or nosy building staff. Maria first encountered the Sunrise Consulting crew on a Tuesday morning in late October. She had been cleaning the 15th floor as usual when she noticed the door to their office was slightly open. Through the gap, she could see stacks of cash being counted on a large table. Several men in suits were discussing something in hushed tones while one of them operated what looked like a money-counting machine. Being the conscientious worker she was, Maria simply continued with her cleaning duties. She had learned long ago that the secret to job security was to see nothing, hear nothing, and mind her own business. But as she worked her way down the hallway, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces, she accidentally knocked over a small potted plant near their doorway. The crash of the ceramic pot hitting the marble floor echoed through the quiet hallway, like a gunshot. Within seconds, 3 men emerged from the office, their faces twisted with anger and suspicion. Vinny Torino himself stepped out last, his cold gray eyes immediately focusing on the elderly cleaning woman, who was frantically trying to sweep up the broken pieces. "What are you doing here, old lady?" Vinny's voice carried a menacing tone that made Maria's hands tremble as she continued cleaning up the mess. "You see anything you shouldn't have seen?" Maria kept her eyes down, focusing on the broken pottery. "I'm sorry, sir, I was just cleaning. I didn't see nothing. I mind my own business." Her English, heavily accented from her childhood in El Salvador, became even more broken when she was nervous. One of Vinny's associates, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, stepped closer to Maria. "Boss, maybe we should make sure she understands the importance of keeping her mouth shut." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Vinny studied Maria for a long moment, taking in her worn uniform, her calloused hands, and the fear in her dark eyes. To him, she represented everything he despised about honest, hard-working people. They were weak, easily intimidated, and completely beneath his notice under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Listen carefully, abuela," Vinny said, using the Spanish word for grandmother in a mocking tone. "You work this floor every day, don't you? Well, things have changed around here. From now on, you stay away from our office. You don't clean near our door, you don't empty our trash, and you definitely don't go knocking over plants and making noise when we're conducting business." Maria nodded quickly, still not looking up from the floor. "Yes, sir, I understand. I won't bother you." But Vinny wasn't finished. He crouched down next to where Maria was kneeling, bringing his face close to hers. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with cigarettes made her feel sick to her stomach. "I don't think you really understand, old woman. See, what we do here is very private, very important. And if word gets out about anything you might have seen or heard, well, let's just say it would be very bad for your health." The scarred man laughed, a sound that sent chills down Maria's spine. "Yeah, very. Bad for her health. Maybe she should find a different building to clean. Different job altogether. Maria finally looked up, meeting Vinny's cruel gaze for just a moment before looking away again. In that brief instant, she saw something that terrified her more than his words ever could. She saw a man who would hurt her without hesitation, without remorse, and without consequence. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need this job. I have nobody else. I won't cause any trouble, I promise." Vinny stood up slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his expensive suit. "That's what I like to hear. But promises are easy to make, abuela. Keeping them is what matters. You remember what I told you and we'll get along just fine. You forget." He let the threat hang in the air like smoke. As the men retreated back into their office, Maria finished cleaning up the broken plant with shaking hands. She completed the rest of her duties on the 15th floor as quickly as possible, staying as far away from the Sunrise Consulting office as she could manage. But even as she worked, she could feel eyes watching her through the frosted glass doors. That night, Maria lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She had survived civil war in El Salvador, the dangerous journey to America, and 30 years of backbreaking work to build a life in Chicago. She had always believed that if she kept her head down and worked hard, she would be safe. But now, for the first time in decades, she felt truly afraid. What Maria didn't know was that her encounter with Vinny Torino and his crew had been observed by someone else entirely. From a surveillance van parked across the street from the Meridian Tower, FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen had been watching the building for weeks, waiting for exactly this kind of confirmation that criminal activity was taking place on the 15th floor. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen had been tracking Vincent Torino's organization for almost 2 years. What started as a routine money laundering investigation had evolved into something much larger and more dangerous. Through careful surveillance, wiretaps, and financial analysis, she had uncovered a criminal network that stretched across 3 states and involved millions of dollars in illegal activities. The breakthrough came when one of Torino's former associates, facing a lengthy prison sentence on unrelated charges, agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. He provided crucial information about the organization's structure, their methods of operation, and most importantly, their new headquarters in the Meridian Tower. For the past 6 weeks, Agent Chen and her team had maintained round-the-clock surveillance of the building. They had identified key players coming and going, documented suspicious activities, and built a solid foundation for their case. What they needed now was definitive proof of criminal activity taking place inside that 15th floor office. The surveillance equipment in their van was state-of-the-art. High-powered cameras with telephoto lenses could capture clear images through the building's windows. Sensitive listening devices could pick up conversations from remarkable distances. Computer systems analyzed patterns of movement and behavior, looking for anything unusual or incriminating. Agent Chen had been watching the building through binoculars when she witnessed the confrontation between Torino's men and the elderly cleaning woman. Even without audio, the body language told a clear story of intimidation and threats. She watched as the old woman cowered before the criminals, saw the fear in her posture, and felt a familiar anger building in her chest. Sarah Chen had joined the FBI 15 years earlier, driven by a desire to protect innocent people from predators like Vincent Torino. She had grown up in a neighborhood where criminals preyed on hardworking families, where elderly residents lived in fear, and where violence was an ever-present threat. Seeing that cleaning woman being terrorized brought back memories of her own grandmother, who had been robbed and beaten by gang members when Sarah was just 16 years old. "Rodriguez, are you getting this?" Agent Chen spoke into her radio, addressing her partner who was monitoring the situation from another location. "Copy that, Chen. I saw the whole thing. Looks like our boy Vinny just made his first big mistake." Agent Miguel Rodriguez had been working with Chen for 3 years, and they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's thoughts and methods. Agent Chen lowered her binoculars and reached for her notebook. "That cleaning woman could be the key to this whole case. If we can get her to cooperate, she might be able to provide us with the inside access we need." "You think she'll talk?" She looked pretty scared from where I'm sitting. That's exactly why she'll talk. People like Torino think fear makes them untouchable, but it's usually what brings them down. Fear makes people angry, and angry people want justice. The next morning, Agent Chen positioned herself in the coffee shop across the street from Maria's apartment building. She had spent most of the previous evening researching everything she could find about Maria Santos. The elderly woman had an impressive record. No criminal history, steady employment for 3 decades, active in her local church, and known in her neighborhood as someone who helped other immigrants navigate the complexities of American life. At exactly 7:15, Maria emerged from her building and began walking toward the bus stop. Agent Chen quickly paid for her coffee and followed at a discreet distance. She had planned to approach Maria during her lunch break, but the fear she had seen in the woman's eyes the previous day made her reconsider. This conversation needed to happen in a place where Maria would feel safe and comfortable. Agent Chen waited until Maria was seated on the bus, then took a seat several rows behind her. The ride to downtown Chicago took 45 minutes, giving the agent time to plan her approach carefully. She knew she would have only one chance to gain Maria's trust, and if she handled it wrong, she might lose a crucial witness forever. When the bus reached Maria's stop near the Meridian Tower, Agent Chen followed her off, but immediately turned in the opposite direction. She spent the next few hours conducting surveillance from various positions around the building, noting the arrival times of Torino's associates and documenting their activities. At noon, Maria emerged from the building carrying a brown bag lunch. She walked to a small park 2 blocks away where she usually ate her meal alone on a bench under an old oak tree. This was the moment Agent Chen had been waiting for. "Mrs. Santos?" Agent Chen approached the bench slowly, her badge visible but not threatening. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm with the FBI, and I was wondering if I could speak with you for a few minutes." Maria looked up with startled eyes, her sandwich frozen halfway to her mouth. "FBI? I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong." Agent Chen sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Santos. You haven't done anything wrong. But I think you might have seen something yesterday that could help us with an important investigation." The color drained from Maria's face. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just clean offices. I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing." "Mrs. Santos, I know you're afraid. I saw what happened yesterday on the 15th floor. I saw how those men treated you, and I know they threatened you." Agent Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "But I also know you're a brave woman. You've overcome more challenges in your life than most people ever face." Maria's hands began to tremble slightly. "You don't understand. These are dangerous men. They could hurt me. They could hurt my neighbors. I can't help you." Agent Chen pulled out her phone and showed Maria a photograph. It was a picture of Vincent Torino leaving a courthouse after avoiding conviction on previous charges due to witness intimidation. This man's name is Vincent Torino. He's a criminal who has spent his entire adult life hurting innocent people. He steals from hardworking families, he threatens elderly residents, and he destroys communities. Maria stared at the photograph, her expression unreadable. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I believe you have the power to help us stop him, not just for yourself, but for all the other innocent people he's going to hurt if we don't put him in prison where he belongs." For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Maria continued eating her sandwich mechanically, while Agent Chen waited patiently for a response. Finally, Maria set down her food and looked directly at the FBI agent. "If I help you, can you promise they won't hurt me?" Agent Chen leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Santos, I can promise you that we will do everything in our power to protect you. We have resources, we have experience, and we have a track record of keeping our witnesses safe. But more importantly, if we don't stop Torino now, he's going to keep threatening you anyway. Criminals like him don't just forget about witnesses. They see them as loose ends that need to be tied up." The truth of those words hit Maria like a physical blow. She had been trying to convince herself that if she stayed quiet and avoided trouble, Torino would leave her alone. But deep down, she knew that men like him didn't forgive or forget. "What would I have to do?" Maria's voice was barely above, a whisper. Agent Chen felt a surge of hope, but she kept her expression neutral and professional. For now, we just need you to continue doing your job exactly as you've been doing it. But if you see anything unusual, anything that might help us build our case, we need you to document it and report it to us. Maria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, Agent Chen saw something new there. A spark of determination that hadn't been present before. My grandmother in El Salvador used to say that good people must stand up to evil people, or else the evil people win. Maria's voice grew stronger as she spoke. I've been afraid for too long. Yes, Agent Chen, I will help you. Working as an FBI informant while maintaining her regular cleaning duties proved to be more challenging than Maria had anticipated. Agent Chen had provided her with a tiny recording device disguised as a button on her uniform and a special smartphone that could take pictures without making any sound or showing any flash. The technology made Maria nervous, but she was determined to help bring down the men who had threatened her. Over the next 3 weeks, Maria began to notice patterns in the criminal organization's activities. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, several men would arrive at the Sunrise Consulting office carrying large duffel bags. She could hear the sound of money-counting machines running for hours at a time. Phone conversations leaked through the thin office walls, revealing discussions about collections, territories, and problems that needed to be solved. The most disturbing discovery came on a Thursday afternoon when Maria was cleaning the women's restroom on the 15th floor. She could hear voices coming from the Sunrise Consulting office through the ventilation system. Vincent Torino was speaking with someone on the phone, his voice filled with cold anger. I don't care what his excuses are, Tony. He borrowed $50,000 from us 6 months ago, and now he thinks he can just disappear. Nobody disappears from Vincent Torino. There was a pause as the person on the other end responded, Yes, I know where his daughter goes to school. Maybe it's time for little Susie to have an accident. Maria's blood ran cold. She pressed the record button on her hidden device, capturing every word of the conversation. This wasn't just about money laundering anymore. These men were planning to hurt a child to collect on a debt. When she met with Agent Chen that evening in the parking lot of a grocery store several miles from the Meridian Tower, Maria's hands were shaking as she handed over the recording device. Agent Chen, they're planning to hurt a little girl. Her name is Susie, and they want to use her to force her father to pay them money. Maria's voice was urgent, desperate. Agent Chen listened to the recording through headphones, her expression growing darker with each passing second. Mrs. Santos, this is exactly what we needed. This recording gives us grounds for immediate action. To protect this child, can you find her? Can you save her? We'll find her, don't worry. Our technical team can trace phone records and identify who Torino was talking to. We'll have protective details on this family within 24 hours. Agent Chen's voice was calm and professional, but Maria could see the determination in her eyes. The next morning, Maria arrived at work to find the Meridian Tower buzzing with unusual activity. Vincent Torino was pacing back and forth in the hallway outside his office, speaking rapidly into his phone. His associates looked nervous and kept checking their watches. Something had gone wrong with their plans. Through her network of contacts in law enforcement, Agent Chen had already identified the threatened family. Thomas Morrison, a small business owner who had borrowed money from Torino's organization to keep his restaurant afloat during the pandemic, had indeed been trying to avoid repaying the loan. His 8-year-old daughter Susan attended Riverside Elementary School just 3 miles from the Meridian Tower. Federal agents had positioned themselves at the school, at the Morrison family home, and at strategic points throughout the neighborhood. When Torino's men arrived to carry out their intimidation plan, they found themselves surrounded by law enforcement officers. But the failed kidnapping attempt made Torino more dangerous than ever before. He knew that someone had leaked information to the FBI, and he was determined to find out who. That afternoon, he called an emergency meeting of his entire organization. Maria was emptying trash cans in the hallway when she heard Torino's voice, booming from inside the office. Somebody in this building is talking to the feds. Somebody saw something they weren't supposed to see, heard something they weren't supposed to hear, and now they're trying to bring us down. One of his associates, a man Maria recognized as Tony Marcelli, spoke up. "Boss, it could be anybody. Security guards, other tenants, maintenance workers." "Or that old cleaning lady," interrupted the scarred man whose name Maria had learned, was Danny Kozlowski. "She's been acting strange lately. Nervous, jumpy, always looking around like she's watching for something." Maria's heart began pounding so hard she was afraid they would hear it through the walls. She forced herself to continue working, emptying the trash can as quietly as possible while straining to hear every word of their conversation. "You might be onto something, Danny." Torino's voice had taken on that cold, menacing tone that Maria remembered from their first encounter. "That old woman has access to this entire floor. She could have planted bugs, cameras, recording devices. Hell, she could be wearing a wire right now." The men laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was the laughter of predators discussing their prey. "What do you want to do about it, boss?" Tony asked. "I want her brought in for a conversation. Tonight. After the building closes. Just her and us, nice and private. We'll find out exactly what she knows and who she's been talking to." Maria had to bite her tongue to keep from gasping out loud. She quickly finished her work in the hallway and retreated to the supply closet where she kept her cleaning equipment. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her special phone and sent a text message to Agent Chen. "They suspect me. Planning to question me tonight after building closes. Help." The response came back within minutes. "Stay calm. Do not deviate from your normal routine. We are monitoring the situation. You are not alone." But as the day wore on, Maria felt more alone than she had ever felt in her entire life. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. When she saw Danny Kozlowski watching her from the doorway of their office, she nearly dropped the mop she was carrying. As closing time approached, Maria faced an impossible choice. If she left the building at her normal time, Torino's men might follow her home and confront her there, possibly endangering her neighbors. If she tried to hide somewhere in the building, they would eventually find her. And if she called in sick or failed to show up for her normal duties, it would only confirm their suspicions about her. At 5:30, as the last of the legitimate office workers were leaving the building, Maria made her decision. She would face whatever was coming head-on. She had lived through worse things than Vincent Torino and his crew. She had survived war, poverty, and 30 years of backbreaking labor. She would not be defeated by fear. But as she prepared to clean the 15th floor one more time, Maria had no idea that Agent Chen and a team of federal agents were already in position throughout the building. Hidden surveillance equipment had been monitoring Torino's organization for weeks. The FBI had anticipated this exact scenario, and they were ready. The trap was set. Vincent Torino thought he was about to eliminate a dangerous witness. Instead, he was about to walk into the most carefully planned federal operation of Agent Chen's career. As the building's lights began to dim and the last security guard completed his evening rounds, the real confrontation was about to begin. Maria Santos, a 78-year-old cleaning woman who had never hurt anyone in her life, was about to become the center of a battle between justice and corruption that would determine the fate of one of Chicago's most dangerous criminal organizations, the T. Elevator doors closed behind her as she rode up to the 15th floor, possibly for the last time. In her heart, she whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her many years ago in El Salvador. "Give me strength to do what is right, even when what is right is dangerous." The 15th floor felt different that evening. The usual hum of office activity had been replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the sound of Maria's cleaning cart wheels rolling across the marble floor. She could feel eyes watching her from behind the frosted glass doors of the Sunrise Consulting office, but she forced herself to maintain her normal routine. Agent Sarah Chen was positioned in the stairwell between the 14th and 15th floors, wearing tactical gear and monitoring the situation through a sophisticated communication system. Her team consisted of 12 highly trained federal agents strategically placed throughout the building. They had spent hours studying the building's layout, identifying every possible escape route, and preparing for multiple scenarios. "All units, this is Control. Subject is beginning her normal cleaning routine. Suspects are confirmed inside their office. Remember, we wait for clear evidence of a federal crime before we move. We need them to make the first aggressive action. Agent Chen's voice was calm and professional, but her finger remained poised over the radio button that would signal her team to storm the building. At 7:15 p.m., exactly as the FBI surveillance team had predicted, Vincent Torino emerged from his office. He was accompanied by Danny Kozlowski and two other men Maria didn't recognize. Their demeanor was casual, almost friendly, but Maria could sense the danger radiating from them like heat from a fire. "Evening, Abuela," Torino called out, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. "Working late tonight, I see. Very dedicated. I admire that in a person." Maria continued mopping the floor, keeping her eyes down. "Good evening, sir, just finishing up my duties." Torino walked closer, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. "You know, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about the importance of keeping certain things private, very important things." "Yes, sir, I remember. I mind my own business." "That's what you said, but I have to be honest with you, Maria. Can I call you Maria? I'm starting to have some doubts about whether you really understand the situation here." For the first time, Maria looked up and made eye contact with Torino. What she saw there made her stomach clench with fear, but she forced herself to keep her voice steady. "I understand perfectly, sir. I clean offices. That's all I do." Danny Kozlowski stepped forward, positioning himself between Maria and the elevator. "See, that's the problem, old woman. Cleaning offices means you see things, you hear things, and lately some very sensitive information has been getting out to people who shouldn't have it." In the stairwell, Agent Chen listened to every word through the surveillance equipment. Her team was ready to move at her signal, but federal law required them to wait until the suspects committed a clear act of aggression or made specific threats that constituted a crime. "I want to show you something, Maria." Torino pulled out his smartphone and displayed a photograph on the screen. It was a picture of Maria's apartment building, taken from across the street. "Nice neighborhood you live in. Lots of families. Lots of children playing in the courtyard. Very peaceful." Maria's blood turned to ice. "Why do you have pictures of my home?" "Because I believe in being thorough. You see, when someone in my line of work has trust issues with a particular individual, we like to understand all the factors involved. Your building, your neighbors, the routes you take to work every day. All very interesting information." The threat was clear, even if it hadn't been stated directly. Torino wasn't just threatening Maria, he was threatening everyone she cared about. The realization hit her like a physical blow, but it also sparked something else inside her. A fury she hadn't felt since she was a young woman fighting for survival in El Salvador. "You leave my neighbors alone," Maria said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "They have nothing to do with this." Torino smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Now that's interesting. 5 minutes ago, you were just a scared old cleaning lady who didn't know anything about anything. Now suddenly you're giving me orders? That tells me you know exactly what this is." One of the men Maria didn't recognize stepped forward. He was younger than the others, maybe in his 30s, with the kind of lean build that suggested he was used to violence. "Boss, why don't we take her somewhere more private? Ask our questions without worrying about interruptions." Agent Chen's hand tightened on her radio. The situation was escalating quickly, but they still needed the suspects to make an overt criminal act before they could legally intervene. "That's a good idea, Marcus." Torino nodded approvingly. "Maria, we're going to take a little trip. Somewhere we can have a nice quiet conversation about what you've seen and who you've been talking to." Maria took a step backward, her cleaning supplies forgotten. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "I'm afraid that's not really your choice anymore." Danny Kozlowski pulled back his jacket just enough to reveal the handle of a gun tucked into his waistband. "Now, we can do this easy or we can do this hard. But either way, you're coming with us." That was the signal Agent Chen had been waiting for. The display of a weapon combined with the clear threat of kidnapping constituted multiple federal crimes. She pressed the radio button 3 times, the agreed-upon signal for immediate action. "All units go, go, go!" The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. FBI agents burst through the stairwell doors from both ends of the hallway. Two agents rappelled down from the roof access, crashing through a skylight in a shower of glass, and landing behind Torino's group. The elevator doors opened to reveal 4 more agents in full tactical gear. FBI, nobody move, hands in the air. For a moment, everyone on the 15th floor stood frozen in shock. Vincent Torino's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, rage, and finally a cold calculation as he assessed his options. Danny Kozlowski's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped when he found himself staring down the barrels of 6 FBI weapons. This is impossible, Torino snarled. There's no way you could have known. Agent Chen stepped into view, her weapon trained on Torino's chest. Vincent Torino, you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, racketeering, assault, and attempted kidnapping. You have the right to remain silent. You think you're smart, lady cop? You think this changes anything? I got lawyers, I got connections, I got resources you can't even imagine. Maybe so. But what you don't have anymore is freedom. Agent Chen nodded to her team, and within minutes all 4 suspects were handcuffed and being read their rights. As the chaos settled, Agent Chen approached Maria, who was standing against the wall with tears streaming down her face. Are you okay, Mrs. Santos? Maria nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she found her voice. Is it over? Are they going to prison? This is just the beginning, but yes, they're going to prison. What you did here tonight, the courage you showed over the past few weeks, you probably saved lives. That little girl we talked about, she's safe at home with her family because of you. Maria looked around at the scene. Federal agents securing evidence, suspects being led away in handcuffs, crime scene technicians photographing everything. It was like something from a television show, except it was real, and she had been at the center of it. What happens now? Maria asked. Now we build the strongest possible case to make sure these men never threaten anyone again. And you, Mrs. Santos, you get to go home knowing that you stood up to evil and won. As Maria gathered her cleaning supplies for the last time on the 15th floor of the Meridian Tower, she thought about her grandmother's words from so many years ago. Good people must stand up to evil people, or else the evil people win. Tonight the good people had won a significant victory. But as Agent Chen would soon discover, Vincent Torino's organization was much larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The arrests at the Meridian Tower were just the beginning of a federal investigation that would ultimately expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of city government and law enforcement. The arrests at the Meridian Tower made headlines across Chicago, but for FBI agent Sarah Chen, the real work was just beginning. Vincent Torino might have been in federal custody, but his criminal organization had tentacles that reached far beyond one office building. The evidence seized from Sunrise Consulting revealed a network of corruption that shocked even experienced federal investigators. Computer hard drives contained financial records showing payments to police officers, city inspectors, and local politicians. Bank statements revealed millions of dollars flowing through dozens of shell companies. Most disturbing of all were the detailed records of Torino's enforcement activities, a catalog of violence and intimidation that had terrorized Chicago's business community for years. Maria Santos found herself at the center of a media storm she never wanted or expected. News reporters camped outside her apartment building, eager to interview the hero cleaning lady who had brought down a major crime boss. But Maria had no interest in publicity. She had already given her statement to the FBI, and now she just wanted to return to her quiet life. Mrs. Santos, please, just one interview, pleaded a reporter from Channel 7 News. The people of Chicago want to know about your courage, your story. Maria shook her head firmly as she hurried toward the bus stop. I'm not a hero. I just did what was right, that's all. But doing what was right had consequences Maria hadn't anticipated. Within a week of Torino's arrest, she began receiving threatening phone calls at her apartment. The voice was always different, but the message was always the same. You made a big mistake, old woman. Vincent has a lot of friends and they don't forget. Agent Chen assigned protective detail to watch Maria's building, but the threats continued. Someone left a dead rat outside her apartment door. Her mailbox was vandalized with obscene graffiti. One morning she discovered that all 4 tires on her neighbor's car had been slashed. a clear message that the violence could extend to anyone close to her. "This has to stop," Maria told Agent Chen during one of their regular check-in meetings. "These people are innocent. They don't deserve to be hurt because of what I did. Mrs. Santos, I understand your concern, but running away won't solve anything. Torino's organization is desperate right now. They think if they can intimidate you into changing your testimony, they might be able to get him released on bail." Agent Chen was right about the desperation, but she underestimated how far Torino's remaining associates would go to protect their boss. While Torino sat in federal lockup awaiting trial, his lieutenant Tony Markelli had taken control of day-to-day operations. Unlike Torino, who preferred to maintain at least a facade of legitimacy, Markelli was a brutal enforcer who believed that fear was the most effective business tool. Marcelli had a different plan for dealing with Maria Santos. Instead of trying to intimidate her into silence, he wanted to eliminate her permanently. In his twisted logic, a dead witness couldn't testify, and it would send a clear message to anyone else who might consider cooperating with law enforcement. The plan was set into motion on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Maria was returning home from her new job at a small office building on the south side of the city. The FBI had helped her find work somewhere far from Torino's usual territory. As she walked from the bus stop to her apartment building, she noticed a black sedan following slowly behind her. Her FBI training kicked in immediately. Agent Chen had taught her to be aware of her surroundings, to trust her instincts, and to never dismiss potential threats as coincidence. Maria ducked into a convenience store and called the emergency number Agent Chen had given her. "This is Maria Santos. I think someone is following me." The response was immediate. "Mrs. Santos, stay exactly where you are. Do not leave the store. We have agents en route to your location." But Marcelli's men were already moving. 2 men entered the convenience store through the front door, while a third positioned himself at the back exit. They were dressed like ordinary customers, but Maria could see the predatory way they moved, scanning the store for threats and escape routes. The store clerk, a young man named Ahmed who had immigrated from Somalia, sensed the tension immediately. "Can I help you gentlemen find something?" One of the men, tall with graying hair, ignored Ahmed and walked directly toward Maria. "Mrs. Santos, I think you and I need to have a conversation." Maria backed toward the rear of the store, her heart pounding. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave me alone." "I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, you've caused some serious problems for some serious people. Now it's time to fix those problems." Ahmed reached under the counter for the panic button that would alert police, but the second man grabbed his wrist. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, kid. This doesn't concern you." What none of them realized was that Agent Chen's team had been monitoring the area around Maria's apartment building for weeks. They had identified several suspicious vehicles conducting surveillance, and the black sedan that had followed Maria was already on their watch list. FBI agent Miguel Rodriguez was positioned 2 blocks away when he received the emergency call. "All units, priority 1. Our witness is in immediate danger at the corner market on Ashland Avenue. Suspects are armed and considered extremely dangerous." The response was swift and coordinated. Federal agents surrounded the convenience store within minutes, cutting off all possible escape routes. A sniper team took position on the roof of the building across the street. Negotiators prepared to make contact with the suspects inside. But Marcelli's men had no intention of surrendering peacefully. When they saw federal agents taking positions, outside, the tall man pulled out a pistol and grabbed Maria around the throat. "Looks like your FBI friends found us," he snarled into her ear. "Too bad they're too late to save you." Ahmed dove behind the counter as the other customers in the store screamed and ran for cover. The sound of sirens filled the air, but inside the store, time seemed to stand still. "Let me go," Maria whispered, but her voice was barely audible. "Not a chance, grandmother. You destroyed something very important to us. Now we're going to destroy something important to the FBI." Agent Chen's voice came through a bullhorn outside the store. "This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Release the hostages and come out with your hands visible." The man holding Maria laughed bitterly. "Tell your FBI friends that Vincent Torino sends his regards." But as he spoke, he made a crucial mistake. He loosened his grip on Maria for just a moment to adjust his weapon. It was the opening she had been waiting for. Drawing on strength she didn't know she still possessed, Maria drove her elbow backward into his ribs with all the force she could muster. The impact knocked the wind out of her captor and caused him to stumble backward. In that instant of confusion, the store's front windows exploded inward as FBI agents stormed the building. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The next few seconds were chaos. Gunshots rang out as the suspects tried to fight their way out of the store. Ahmed crawled toward the back exit, desperately trying to escape the violence. Maria found herself on the floor behind a display of potato chips, praying that the nightmare would end. When the shooting stopped, 2 of Marcelli's men were dead and the 3rd was wounded and in custody. Ahmed had escaped unharmed, and Maria had suffered only minor cuts from broken glass. But the psychological impact of the attack would stay with her for months to come. As paramedics checked her for injuries, Maria looked up at Agent Chen with tears in her eyes. "When will this end? When will I be safe?" Agent Chen knelt beside her, her voice gentle but determined. "It ends when we put every single one of these criminals behind bars. What happened here tonight proves how desperate they've become. But it also proves something else. They're making mistakes. Big mistakes. And mistakes are what put criminals in prison for life." The failed assassination attempt had given the FBI exactly what they needed to dismantle Torino's entire organization. The wounded gunman, facing life in prison, agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. His testimony would expose corruption in the Chicago Police Department, reveal connections to organized crime families in 3 other states, and ultimately lead to the conviction of more than 40 individuals. But for Maria Santos, the victory felt hollow. She had survived another attempt on her life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there would always be more men like Vincent Torino and Tony Marcelli, more innocent people who needed someone to stand up for them, more battles between good and evil that required ordinary people to do extraordinary things. As she rode in the FBI vehicle back to a safe house, Maria made a decision that would surprise everyone, including herself. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let fear control her life. If testifying against Vincent Torino could help put him away forever, then that's exactly what she was going to do. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was surrounded by the largest security operation in the building's history. Vincent Torino's trial had attracted national attention, not just because of the criminal charges, but because of the extraordinary circumstances that led to his capture. The case had become a symbol of ordinary citizens standing up to organized crime, and Maria Santos had become the reluctant face of that resistance. Inside the courthouse, Maria sat in the witness waiting room, her hands folded in her lap. At 79 years old, she looked smaller and more fragile than ever, but there was a steel in her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. Agent Sarah Chen sat beside her, reviewing her testimony one final time. "Remember, Mrs. Santos, just tell the truth. Tell them exactly what you saw, exactly what you heard, exactly what those men said to you. The defense attorneys are going to try to confuse you, but don't let them. Your words are going to put Vincent Torino in prison for the rest of his life." Maria nodded, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I understand, Agent Chen. I've been waiting for this day for months. I'm ready." The prosecution had built an overwhelming case against Torino and his organization. The evidence seized from the Meridian Tower, combined with testimony from multiple cooperating witnesses, painted a detailed picture of decades of criminal activity. Financial experts had traced millions of dollars in laundered money. Former associates had described murders, beatings, and extortion schemes, but Maria's testimony was the emotional centerpiece of the case, the moment when Torino's arrogance and cruelty had finally caught up with him. Vincent Torino himself sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, showing no emotion as witness after witness testified against him. His lawyers had tried every legal maneuver possible to suppress evidence, discredit witnesses, and delay the trial. But federal Judge Patricia Williams had seen through every attempt at obstruction, and the case had proceeded with remarkable efficiency. When Maria's name was called, a hush fell over the packed courtroom. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Family members of Torino's victims watched with intense hope. And Torino himself looked directly at the elderly woman who had brought down his criminal empire. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "My name is Maria Santos. I am 79 years old, and I have been a cleaning woman in Chicago for 31 years. Mrs. Santos, I want to direct your attention to October 23rd of last year. Were you working at the Meridian Tower that day?" "Yes, I was. I had been cleaning that building for almost 3 years." For the next 2 hours, Maria recounted everything that had happened. Her first encounter with Torino's men, the threats and intimidation, the recorded conversation about hurting a child, the final confrontation when she was nearly kidnapped. Her voice never wavered, even when describing the most frightening moments. The defense attorney, a high-priced criminal lawyer named Jonathan Pierce, tried his best to discredit Maria's testimony. He suggested she was confused about what she had seen. He implied she had financial motives for cooperating with the FBI. He even questioned whether her memory could be trusted at her age. But Maria had faced worse intimidation from Torino himself. She answered every question with quiet dignity, never allowing Pierce to rattle her or contradict her story. "Mrs. Santos," Pierce said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you were paid by the FBI for your cooperation in this case?" "No, sir. I was never paid anything. I did this because it was the right thing to do." "But you were given protection, weren't you? New housing, a new job, assistance with your living expenses?" "The FBI helped keep me safe, yes. But I would have testified even if they hadn't. Some things are more important than being safe." The impact of her words was visible throughout the courtroom. Several jurors were visibly moved. Even some of the reporters were wiping their eyes. When Maria finished her testimony and stepped down from the witness stand, she looked directly at Vincent Torino one last time. For just a moment their eyes met, and she saw something she had never seen in him before: defeat. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, the foreman announced guilty verdicts on all counts. Vincent Torino was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His associates received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years, but the impact of the case extended far beyond the courtroom. The corruption exposed during the investigation led to the resignation of 2 city councilmen, the suspension of 6 police officers, and a complete overhaul of how the city monitored business licenses and building permits. Tony Marcelli, who had ordered the attack on Maria at the convenience store, was sentenced to death for the murder of federal agents during a subsequent arrest attempt. 3 months after the trial ended, Maria was invited to a ceremony at FBI headquarters in Chicago. She was being honored with the Director's Award for Public Service, the highest recognition the Bureau could give to a civilian. Agent Chen had nominated her, writing in her recommendation, "Mrs. Santos demonstrated courage under fire that would be remarkable in a trained agent, let alone a civilian with no law enforcement experience. Her willingness to risk everything for justice embodies the highest ideals of American law enforcement." At the ceremony, surrounded by FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and local law enforcement officials, Maria was asked to say a few words. She approached the podium slowly, still wearing the same simple black dress she had worn to testify at Torino's trial. "When I was a little girl in El Salvador," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the large auditorium, "my grandmother told me that evil only wins when good people do nothing. For most of my life, I thought that meant just staying out of trouble, working hard, and not bothering anyone." She paused, looking out at the audience of law enforcement professionals who had gathered to honor her. "But I learned something important this year. Sometimes doing nothing is the same as helping evil win. Sometimes good people have to do scary things, dangerous things, because if we don't, innocent people get hurt." Maria's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I want to thank Agent Chen and all the FBI agents who kept me safe and helped me do the right thing. But mostly, I want to say this to anyone who might be listening. If you see something wrong, if you know someone is being hurt, Don't wait for someone else to speak up. Be brave. Be the person who stands up to evil. Because if we all do that, evil doesn't stand a chance. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Today, Maria Santos lives quietly in a small apartment in suburban Chicago. She still works as a cleaning woman, though now she cleans offices for a company that specializes in serving federal buildings. She receives regular visits from Agent Chen, who has become one of her closest friends. And every few months, she gets letters from people around the country who have heard her story and been inspired to speak up against injustice in their own communities. The Meridian Tower still stands in downtown Chicago, but the 15th floor now houses a legitimate consulting firm that helps small businesses navigate federal regulations. There's a small plaque in the lobby installed by the building's management company that reads, "In honor of Maria Santos and all those who choose courage over comfort." Vincent Torino died in federal prison 18 months after his conviction. The victim of violence from other inmates who had no tolerance for men who threatened children, his criminal organization was completely dismantled, its assets seized and distributed to his victims. And in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, a 79-year-old woman continues to prove every day that heroism comes in all shapes and sizes, and that the most powerful weapon against evil is often the courage of ordinary people who refuse to look the way.